Hello, everyone. It is another Friday. We are here live at Experience Investigators to give you a strategy boost this time. We are talking about journey mapping in action, how it can really help you with your goals overall. Now, this is an Ask Me Anything session, so don't forget you can ask me anything. Go ahead and drop it in the comments. We will get to those questions. As always, today I have Paige from our team here today. Paige, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's been beautiful weather here, so I'm out in my sunroom enjoying it and happy
Excellent.
that it's not freezing yet, but it's also not super duper hot anymore.
I feel like we are in the sweet spot of weather in the Midwest where we are getting out of the hot summer. We had a late hot summer here in Chicago and then getting into the really nice fall crisp days. This is my favorite time of year.
Me too. It's like 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit every
Mhm.
single day, and it's like a little bit like it sometimes drizzles during the day and the leaves start changing. It's
Yep,
perfect.
I
Absolutely perfect.
know. Just give me like a chunky scarf and a pumpkin spice latte, and I am a happy camper.
Have you seen the Lenny Kravitz scarf? The
Yes,
gigantic?
I know.
That's like it's
I'm with
almost
Lenny.
time.
So, of course, we always love hearing where you're from. I'm hanging out in Chicago. Paige is in Kansas City, so we're representing the Midwest of the US here, but I know we get folks from all over the world at these things, and we love hearing about what it's like for you where you are. So, be sure you tell us in the comments.
Absolutely. We're excited to there's so many different places always, and I think last time someone was, like, on a beach, and I
Yes.
was like, "I'll be there. You tell me where you are, and we're doing it live there next week."
I love it. I love it. Well, we, as always, we can't help ourselves, right? We always have so much to cover.
I know, we've got so much to share.
Yes, exactly. But this is a good, meaty, kind of robust topic because I love journey mapping because it's something that everybody can do. It can be low tech or high tech. And we've talked about kind of how to do it. Today, we're going to talk about what to do with it and some of the great case studies that we've been a part of, but also just that we've kind of heard through the years. So I'm excited to share with the group that we have today. And then, of
Yeah,
course, Paige, as we get questions or comments, we'll be addressing those at the end. But if we get some really good ones, feel free to break in.
definitely.
All right, we'll see you in a bit. All right, so today we are talking about really examples of customer journey mapping and how it can really help with your overall goals. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeannie Walters. I am founder and CEO of Experience Investigators. We are celebrating our 15th anniversary this year, which we're pretty excited about. And in those 15 years, we've worked with organizations all over the world. And those organizations have included Fortune 500, as well as higher education, healthcare, nonprofit, public utilities, and government. We have really been fortunate enough to partner with all sorts of organizations, but they all have one thing in common, and that is a leader like you. That is somebody who is a customer experience change agent, somebody who is really trying to make things better on behalf of customers because we know that that's what drives business results. So if that is you, you are in the right place. We are so happy that you're here with us today. If you want some more resources, we have those for you. We'll be sharing some more at the end, but you can always find LinkedIn learning courses. I am proud to say that we have 8, almost 9 available to you on LinkedIn Learning. So just look up my name and you'll see what we have, as well as on our site at Experience Investigators. We have a whole learning center. We also have a whole YouTube playlist with these webinars. So if you missed anything, go ahead and check those out. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's answer this question. Are customer journey maps really necessary? Now, journey mapping is one of those things that sometimes people have participated in and they haven't really seen any changes because of it. I think that this is because they don't treat it like a tool, they treat it like a deliverable. So, here at Experience Investigators, we have a saying that customer journey mapping is a verb, not a noun. And what I mean by that is if we get hung up on the deliverable of the journey map, if it becomes a thing, if it becomes a poster or a piece of art, that doesn't really move your business forward. What we want to do is understand that journey maps are a tool. And the act of journey mapping is where you find the ahas, the moments where you see the challenge or the barrier that a customer is having that you can overcome, or you see a moment of innovation. You see a place in the journey that if you could make that a little more positive, or if you could think bigger about that, then you could really get ahead of your competition. So, when we think about how to really look at this as a tool, we want to make sure that we are understanding the purpose of it. It's really to understand first and tell your customer's story. Process maps are often confused with journey maps. Process maps for your organization are internally focused. They say things like, well, then it goes to our server, right? Like that's how the process works. But the customer doesn't experience that. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about journey mapping, we're always talking about the customer's perspective. Sometimes I see confusion around product roadmaps. Product roadmaps are about what's next for your product, not for the customer. And of course, we have a lot of dashboards in the work that we do. Customer experience often includes voice of the customer and customer feedback metrics. Sometimes we're asked to be accountable around metrics like net promoter score or customer satisfaction rates. And when we look at those things, those certainly inform the work we do as customer experience leaders, but they still don't tell the customer's story. We want to look at mapping as a way to understand how to improve the customer's actual experience by flipping the script and making sure we're always thinking of them and what they're actually dealing with in their real lives. We cannot remove the customer from their real life. Sometimes when we develop things like process maps, that's exactly what we're doing. We're acting as if our process is the only thing happening to this customer, which is malarkey, frankly. We know better, but sometimes that's what we are forced to think about. Journey mapping helps us understand the customer, understand their real life, and understand how our journey can better support what they're trying to do. So, we're going to talk about journey mapping in a real world sense today. I'm not going to go through how to journey map. I'm not going to share examples of journey maps themselves. I'm going to share some interesting stories about how journey maps have helped move organizations forward. If you need help on journey mapping, we have tons of resources on that. Check out the Learning Center, check out our YouTube playlist, and you will find a lot on how to journey mapping. That's just not what we're tackling today. So, first of all, let's talk about the three journey mapping variations. There are different ways to approach journey mapping. Number one is current state mapping. This is about what's actually happening today. If you're starting from scratch, this is always where I recommend you start. If you want to look at what can we do better, what can we create for the customer for the future, ideal state journey mapping is one of the ways that you can do that. You can think really big. You can think through, okay, what if we did introduce this new way to buy our product? What would that look like for the customer? There are all sorts of ways to apply ideal state mapping. And then something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but I have found to be a very powerful tool is competitive journey information because your customers are comparison shopping. They are seeing what your competitors do. They may have experienced your competitors in the past and are shopping around again. We have to make sure that we understand where we fit in the market as well. So let's talk about current state mapping. This is where we want to take a snapshot of today. What is it that customers are experiencing today? This is where you might get resistance on, well, we already know that. We have the process map. We have all these things. But if you don't really have that viewpoint from the customer's perspective, you will miss opportunities to make the journey a little more convenient, a little easier, a little less friction, a little more delightful for them. And that's what we're trying to do in customer experience work is really help a customer get to where they want to go faster, easier, in a more delightful way. A customer, remember, is trying to do something. They are trying to achieve a goal. We are there to support them. Even if they're buying a widget, it's because they want to use that widget for something, or the widget makes them feel good, right? Like sometimes we buy that cupcake because we know that that's what we need in that moment, or we buy that fabulous outfit even though we don't have anywhere to wear it yet, right? It makes us feel a certain way. So we want to look at that snapshot of what is actually happening with the customer in a moment in time based on a certain goal. One of the things I always say about journey mapping, you need a goal and a scope first. Otherwise, it becomes very overwhelming, and that's when it doesn't lead to action. We want it to lead to action. We also say around here we have a bias towards action. Sometimes that means progress over perfection. We might not have the perfect journey map, but the act of journey mapping will help us take action that leads to progress. So, this approach really requires humility. All the work we do in customer experience requires humility. We have to keep this open mind that, you know what, maybe we don't know everything that's happening. Maybe our customers are experiencing things that we don't know about. That requires a certain type of humility to show up and understand that we are there to learn and listen and understand. So, when we talk about current state, when we understand what's happening, here are a few real life wins I wanted to share with you based on current state mapping. So, one client discovered through journey mapping that customers were receiving lots of duplicate emails, duplicate calls, and texts because of a system glitch. You, as a customer, have probably experienced this yourself. And it feels kind of ridiculous when you get an email and you get the same email 20 minutes later or a day later. They are identical, and you can tell that it's automated and it doesn't feel personalized and it doesn't feel like they're really looking at your journey. Journey mapping can help reveal things like that. Now, on the system side, it looked like everything was working, right? It looked like things were just moving along and people were getting their communications. The act of current state journey mapping allowed us to really investigate. I love that word, experience investigators, what was happening with the customers so that we could identify this system glitch. By fixing the glitch, not only did it help improve the customer experience, but you can imagine it helps decrease the cost of using the systems that send out these communications. Many of the systems that we use to send out communications are priced by message. And this happened to be one of those things. They were sending out more than twice of what they needed. So once we identified that glitch and we were able to solve it, it actually reduced the cost of sending communications. It's a total win for the organization. A nonprofit we worked with realized that they were neglecting donors who donated more than once per year. Now, think about that. If you are donating more than once per year, you are very engaged with the cause, with the reason of the nonprofit. But they were kind of treating them the same. They were saying, hey, thanks for the donation in January. Thanks for the donation in June. But they weren't putting that together and really recognizing that these were folks who were very engaged, who were willing to donate more than once a year. So by understanding that through journey mapping, they realized that, you know what, we could do more with these folks. They are invested in the cause that we have. So let's go ahead and create an outreach program for these highly engaged donors. And guess what that leads to? More engagement, more contributions, more revenue for the organization. Again, a total win for the organization. But we have to know what's happening for real in order to make those improvements, in order to create those efficiencies. And then a provider serving educational institutions discovered a better way to sell, which is something that we always get asked about in customer experience work. And this was because journey mapping helped them align sales with the natural cycles of the academic year. Now, every industry has certain cycles around budget, around approval, around all of those things. What was happening was the sales cycle was not aligned with that budget cycle. And just by identifying that through current journey mapping, they were able to make huge changes to how they communicated, how they marketed, where they invested, what events they went to, all of those things, so that they could make sure that they were aligning their sales process more naturally with the budget cycle of the academic institutions that they were serving. So, pretty cool stuff, right? There are even more when you do this. A financial services company found their customers were receiving communications with different acronyms for the same process. Now, I bet some of you are hearing this and kind of rolling your eyes and thinking, oh my gosh, what a mistake. Guess what? Acronyms that we use internally often slip out into customer communications. We have seen this in so many scenarios, not just with financial services, but financial services. Yeah, this happens. So, when this happens, what we found is that especially if you have grown through acquisitions, if you are a large organization and you have acquired other companies, what tends to happen is you might not have the same lingo and language inside your organization. So if you are sending communications from one of those acquired companies and you haven't yet aligned your systems, or maybe you thought you aligned your systems, but the customer is seeing it as what is going on? I'm getting these things that say XYZ over here and YXZ over here. Are they the same? Are they not? So, if you do nothing else after journey mapping or during journey mapping, ask yourself, what is the communication like for the customer? Because that has so much to do with the perception of the customer experience. And we have seen so many times that corporate jargon, your acronyms, the way that you refer to things inside your organization, they get out into those customer communications. So, journey mapping can help you identify where that's happening and then make sure that you are getting across with more simple, clear, direct communication for your customers. Now, this was a win because they improved their communication by identifying this, and that decreased the number of calls to their service center because customers were calling in saying, what does XYZ mean? I don't understand this. Once they were able to improve that communication, they were able to reduce service calls based on that issue. And then one contact center discovered a trend with product returns at a certain time in the customer journey. This happens more than we think as well. We send out products and we say they've got a year warranty. And around 8 months, we start noticing a lot of product returns. Well, what does that tell us? In this case, they were able to use AI to help them discover this trend before it became a crisis. And this is why we're always talking about predictive and proactive customer experience. We want to make sure that we're looking ahead and then going back to the root cause. Instead of just improving the service experience, what created that service experience to begin with? In this case, if a lot of customers are actually trying to refund and return products, that is information we can use to really understand how to address that for the future. So in this case, they used a journey map to show the product team where the problem was so they could address it. Now, what they found was that there was a certain part of the product that was wearing out around that 8-month mark. It just wasn't holding up. Now, the customers didn't know that it was this one specific piece, right? They just thought the product wasn't working. So they would want that refund. Once we identified this is happening again and again and again, the product team then was able to put this higher on their priority list. They were able to address it faster so that they could correct that problem, send out new products, and then they eliminated this issue for the next set of buyers who were buying those products. And we were able to send out those newer products. Now, was this an investment for the company? Absolutely. But we were able to make a business case about why it was so important, why they would actually get more, not only revenue, but customer goodwill who would purchase again. Because having a product that breaks before you're expecting it to break means that you're not going to buy from that company again. You're going to have decrease trust with those products. So we have to paint that business case again about why this is important. But journey mapping can help us tell that customer story and help us identify specifically where we need to really invest in improving the customer journey. All right, so ideal state mapping. This is where we talk about tomorrow. What could we do? Now, there are a couple different versions of ideal state mapping. This is when sometimes we do this because we've identified something in current state where we know we have to fix it. And we say, well, how do we fix it? Sometimes people talk about that as ideal state. I like to think a little bigger here. What could we do if? What could we do if we had a magic wand? That's always a great place to start because, yes, you think really big, but you're going to identify a few things that you can turn into a reality today. If we only think about the current journey and how to improve it, we are living in today and yesterday instead of really thinking about the future. Your competitors are out there trying to disrupt your industry. So if you start with this thinking of this is how it's always been done, then you're limiting your thinking into what is possible today instead of thinking about what could be possible tomorrow. So this is about future looking journey maps. How could we map an experience for our customers that would be so innovative, so delightful, so convenient, so easy, so frictionless that they would just, be customers for life? So we have to constantly be innovating in today's world. It is a very fast pace that we live in with business now. And so we have to be the disruptors. We have to make sure that we are disrupting our own industries. This is what ideal state can do. So, one of the things that I thought was really fascinating was fast food chains in the last several years have really been innovators. And I want you to think about this. One that stood out to me was a chain that reimagined the entire drive through experience based on customer feedback and shifting demands. So, what this means is that something that worked for literally about 30, 40 years, maybe longer, that didn't really have a lot of innovation, they were able to step back and think about what do customers need today? What are cars like today? They're different. How do we use our mobile phones for pre ordering? What does it mean to pay? All of those things are different. And so we have to innovate around that. But one of the things that they were able to do was really look at the timing of going through the drive through. How could we make it faster, more convenient, safer, cleaner, all of those things? When we think like that, we think differently about the experience instead of just thinking, okay, how could we shave off a minute of going through the drive through? Yes, we can do that. And yes, that can help us with some of those quick wins. But what we want to do when we're doing ideal state is really think about what is the ideal? How could we get there? Now, this is where you might identify things that seem really hard to do, but what could you do? So, starting big and then narrowing can help us take those steps. Progress over perfection. We might not be able to have that magic wand today, but could we take a piece of that and make it a little better? That will help innovate and get us ahead of our competition. A historic library aimed to create a more accessible experience for patrons with disabilities. And what I loved about this was that they were kind of boxed in, I guess, a little bit with their architecture because it was historic. It was one of those landmark buildings. But they realized that it really wasn't very accessible for people with disabilities, people who use wheelchairs, people who maybe are visually impaired, things like that. So they at first started talking about, oh, I see. Okay, so what we need are ramps. That's simple. We can add some ramps. But somebody said, no, let's take a step back. Let's think about what is that journey like first. Let's actually get some of our patrons involved who have disabilities, who have told us that they have had some challenges here. Let's co-create with them and figure out what is that ideal state. So they talked about the journey first and then brought that to the architects and said, yes, we have to maintain our historical integrity. Yes, we have to maintain our landmark status. but this is the journey we want for these patrons. How do we do that? And by working together in that way with Journey First, they were able to create some really innovative ideas around how to include this type of architecture that they needed, while at the same time really respecting the journey of the people that they served. And so I like to think about this as ideal state helps us be journey first. If we just started with things like, okay, where do we put a ramp? That is limiting what we're trying to do. We want to work with our customers. We want to co create with them and make sure we're thinking about what's really great for them. Now, of course, whenever we talk about accessible customer experience, I always like to remind us that when we create an accessible customer experience for a certain segment, we actually create a more accessible customer experience for everybody. And so it's something that we have to really champion as customer experience leaders because our customers come in all sorts of packages, and we want to make sure that we are respecting everybody's life journey, everybody's journey with our brand. And so by doing this, by starting with that journey first, you can get really creative and innovative about what that means, not just for that segment but for all of your customers. And then, of course, journey mapping this way has helped countless businesses like restaurants and storefronts navigate new journeys. Now, I think in the last 6 years, we have seen more innovation around this in shorter times than we ever have. Now, of course, some of this is because of COVID. Some of this is because there was that big shutdown and we just had to figure things out. That's when things like curbside delivery for groceries became really popular and people started realizing, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm going to do this more often. But creating space for that to happen was a big part of what folks had to do very, very quickly during that shutdown. Same thing with restaurants. How can we make the experience better so that our delivery people aren't in the way of the people trying to step in? How do we make it so that the servers have better journeys throughout the restaurant so that they can be as efficient as possible? All of these things. Cleanliness was a big thing for hotels. They had to figure out very quickly, how can we reassure the people who stay with us that they're in a clean and safe environment? Now, some of those things have absolutely carried on. Curbside is a great example. Grocery delivery is a great example. People really have come to appreciate those conveniences and they're willing to pay for them. So, organizations like grocery stores are realizing we could really do more with this. We could really serve customers in all these different ways and all these different channels. Ideal state journey mapping can really help you visualize, what do we need to do for this? What would that really look like? The curbside thing, originally, some organizations were not really thinking about the customer perspective. So, yes, they had the parking spots, and yes, you could order online, but they had forgotten the step where somebody gets to the parking spot. What do they do? Do they call somebody? Do they scan a QR code? How do they know when to deliver those groceries outside? So, that's what journey mapping can do. It can help you really think through that customer experience that otherwise could be missed if you're just designing a process from the inside out. And then, of course, we want to talk about our competition. We want to benchmark. We want to make sure that we understand the different ways that our journey stacks up against theirs. I have seen some really interesting things happen when we really think about that. So, for example, one client discovered a new feature a competitor was announcing. So there was lots of media about this. They were saying, "Oh, look at this new feature. Aren't we so cool?" And the client actually said, "Wait a minute. We already offer that, but we call it something different." And customers weren't aware that it was really available. So by paying attention to the competitor journey, they actually noticed a flaw with their own journey because customers were just not really aware. They hadn't rolled it out well, they hadn't communicated it. So they said, okay, well, if all this media is happening, we can kind of jump on that with our customers and communicate about how they don't need that competitor because guess what? We already offer that feature. So they were able to communicate differently and save a certain segment of customers who probably would have gone to the competition if they hadn't been paying attention to the competitor journey as well. Then I love using photos and videos, and customer provided photos and videos can be very powerful too. Sometimes what customers will do is if they're kind of irritated with a brand and they start shopping around, they will actually share what the competitor is doing and saying, "Look, they're offering this. Why aren't you?" By using that in this competitive journey and maybe ideal state mapping, it really tells a story about what can happen. In one case, there was a customer generated photo that showed that in one store of the client that it was really hard to find things. They were having a really hard time. And they went to another store and they said, "Why can't you be more like this?" And they showed some of the wayfinding and signage that was there that made it a lot easier to find things. So that was an easy thing that we could say, "Hey, let's invest in making sure that our wayfinding and modern updates in the stores will help people find what they need." We were able to close the loop with that customer as well and invite them in to really give their opinion and share with their network as well. So it's one of those things that if you're not really paying attention to your competitors, there are different schools of thoughts on this, right? Like I think Steve Jobs famously said he never thought about competitors because he was so focused on Apple. That's great. If I mean there is value in that, but we also want to make sure that when we're thinking about our competitors, we're actually thinking about the customer journey that our customers experience by looking at the competitors. Are they starting to think, "Wait, you don't have this over here. I'm seeing all this great stuff over here. What can we learn from that? What can we identify as things that maybe we can improve to stay ahead of the competition in the marketplace?" So, and then finally, this is a fun one too. So, a technology company discovered a competitor was offering a lot more for big rollouts, and when we decided to journey map this, we were very, very narrow in our scope. We said, "Okay, this is what we're looking at. We just want to look at the customer experience, the customer journey for this part of both us and the competitor." And what we found was that the competitor was offering many more proactive touch points where they were supporting the customer throughout this rollout. So we were able to say to the executive team, "Okay, here's what we found. We found that our company is basically offering one proactive touch point. We're saying, 'Hey, how's the rollout going? Let us know if you need anything.'" The competitor was offering 12 distinct touch points along the rollout. So, what that meant was that they had a system in place, they had processes, they had automation, they had personalized ways to do this so that the client, the customer felt like they were getting all this proactive support. They felt very much valued throughout that process because product rollouts can be really tricky with technology. And if you're the one who said, "Yes, this is who we want to go with. Yes, this is the purchase I want to make," you're taking a bit of a risk. So making sure that they felt fully supported help them feel like, "Yes, I made the right decision," and not have that buyer's remorse or feel neglected. So if you're not paying attention to your competitors, I would recommend thinking about what is one area where you could really narrow the scope and just do what you can to understand that journey. Can we always do this perfectly? No, we cannot because we can't become a customer of all of our competitors. But what can you learn? Can you talk to customers who maybe have worked with you and your competitor? Can you look for social media reviews? Can you look all of those places? So this isn't perfect, but it's something that we can do. I do not recommend and I do not want you to be unethical. I do not want you to pose as a customer if you're not. I want you to do this in an ethical way and with integrity so that you can learn on behalf of your customers. You're not trying to take their customers, you're trying to look at how can you better serve your customers when you're doing this. All right. So, be your own disruptor. This is something I think we don't always take advantage of. We get into our ways, we put our head down, we're part of an industry, we've always done it this way, and we just carry on. What we want to do is make sure that we are looking at how do we actually disrupt our own industry? Because if we are not looking at that, There are, I don't know, 5 people around a laptop right now trying to do that right now today in your industry. You may not know of them, you may not have ever heard of them. They are working on it right now. And almost every disruptor of the last decade has been experience based. That's when we think about the Ubers and the Airbnbs and even Amazon back in the day. That was all about experience. They just said, let's do this better. Let's do something better for our customers. So if you are in an industry where everybody's doing something the same way and you think that's going to protect you, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. So we do something called Disruptor Days, where we come in and we help our clients think totally differently about their industry. Because if you can start with the customer, if you can look at experience in this innovative way, you will win. But you need to think differently. And so often we go in there and people say, well, we can't do that because of regulation. We can't do that because our industry doesn't like when so and so does that. All of that goes out the window on disruptor days. We have that magic wand. We think big. And usually what happens is we think so big that we come up with something. We come up with something that we can move forward in the journey to make it more innovative, more convenient, something like that. So if you are not thinking about yourself as a disruptor, you have missed some opportunities already. And that's not what I want for you. I want you to have all the opportunities in front of you. Be your own disruptor. In fact, in CXI Flight School, which is our community, we are going to have a Disruptor Day workshop coming up in November. And I'm so excited because I think it's one of those tools that is just not used enough. And if we can innovate, if we can really look beyond what's possible today, that's what will help us keep our customers into tomorrow. The brands that did not do this, brands like Kodak, brands like Borders, brands like Blockbuster, they did not see the future because they never thought they would be disrupted. We have to think differently. We have to be our own disruptors. All right. So these are the variations. Current state mapping. What's happening today? Ideal state mapping. What can we do tomorrow? Competitive journey. What are our customers seeing in the marketplace that we can leverage, that we can optimize, that we can make sure we are delivering for them? And then I often get asked this question of, okay, we want to do everything. Where do we start? I always recommend starting with current state. You have to know what's happening today because that will help you find those quick wins to address, but it also helps you see what might be possible tomorrow. So start with current state. And then if you want to go forward with the ideal state, you can identify those gaps. Where are we today? Where do we want to be tomorrow? And how can we really make a plan to improve the customer experience to get all these amazing results that we want to get? So, having said that, now is when we go to questions. So, Paige, I'm seeing some activity in my periphery here that we're having some good conversations. So, fill me in.
Yes. So we've got one question here. Can you share a method or exercise you use to encourage creativity and innovation during a customer journey mapping session?
Yes. Okay. We have so many tools in our toolkit for this. I love journey mapping discussions. Uh, Part of the role that I end up playing is helping people stay in the right state of mind because it's so easy to slip into what we know. So, one of the things that I always stress is using I statements from the customer's perspective. This gives you a way to kind of step out of what you know a little bit. The example that comes to mind is I've seen journey maps. People come to me and they say, "Oh, we did journey mapping. It was so great." And I say, "Okay, great. Show me the map." And the phases say things like marketing, sales, operations. The customer never thinks about that, right? That's not the choice that they're making. They're not saying, "Wow, I can't wait to be marketed to today." That's not how we think about it. So using I statements helps us step back and think, what is the customer actually doing here? And on any journey map, you want to address what the customer is thinking, feeling, and doing. And so putting that into I statements means I am thinking, wow, I wonder if I have this need. I wonder if my boss would let me purchase this. I wonder if I could get a promotion. There are all sorts of things around thinking. And I'm feeling a little nervous, right? A little nervous about the next choice. And I'm doing some research to help me feel more confident. So by flipping the script, you realize that it's not marketing, sales, operation. It really is about I have a need I'm trying to figure out. I want to feel a certain way. I want to get over a certain feeling. Much of what we do as humans is driven by anxiety. We want to get out of that uncomfortable place. How can you reassure somebody? How can you help them feel confident in their choice? Those are great things to start. And then when you talk about ideal state mapping and thinking about that for journey mapping, the magic wand question is very, very powerful. What you want to listen for is when people are still putting up those barriers and they're saying things like, well, we could probably do a better job with what we send out to customers. Yeah, you probably could, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what would the customer, if the customer didn't need any communication, what would that look like? How could they get to where they want to go in the most magical way? How could we help them? What are they really trying to do? So those are really powerful when it comes to ideal state as well. Listen for when people are putting self-imposed barriers or just staying too current, like too much about today's obstacles and challenges and barriers and not focused on what could happen. Get optimistic, get idealistic, get about innovation in big ways. The other another kind of innovation tool that I use is blank as blank. And what I mean by that is if we are stuck a little bit, like I'm going to use financial services again, but working with a bank and you say, well, what would the bank of the future look like? What would that experience look like? And they say things like, well, we'd still have tellers, we'd still have the lobby. So then you say, okay, what if we thought of the bank as a hotel? What would that look like? What if we thought of the bank as a hospitality provider or something like that? Because once you start thinking that way, you actually start innovating in a whole new way. And you start thinking like, wow, well, we would want them to feel really welcome. And the way we would do that is this. And somebody would make sure that they have everything they need and they could check in on their phone. And so blank as blank is a really powerful way to think about innovation when you're talking about ideal state and disruption as well.
I think that's so spot on. And especially from what I've seen working with you, like going on site and working with clients, generally, when we're doing this, it's at something that's framed as like maybe you're there and it's your quarterly meeting
Yeah.
and all of your executives are in the room. But we also have to discuss journey mapping. It can be so easy to get into that mindset of like numbers and marketing and sales and really taking a step back to think about the mindset
Hmm.
because it can, especially when you're in that like business work
Yep.
spreadsheets mode, it can be so hard to
Business,
think about.
business.
Yeah, I'm a busy businesswoman. It can be so hard to just take a step back and think about like feelings,
Yep.
emotions, humans, like how are they going to do that? Because it does affect the overall picture, and it's so good to dig into that and see where it can take you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exciting. It's fun.
Yeah,
But we're kind of not taught to think that way. And
definitely.
I think and I mean, it always comes back to this too, like go back to your mission. What are you actually trying to do? Because your mission is not about your products. Your mission is not about your services. Your mission is about what are your customers trying to do? What's the best outcome for them?
Mhm.
And if you can stay squarely focused on that, then that absolutely opens things up too, because then it's less about what you're selling and it's more about what can you actually do for these customers. I have been kind of fascinated by the two women who have done more for small town tourism and all sorts of things. And of course, I'm talking about Taylor Swift and Beyonce. And but what they've done is create like it's not about going to hear them sing their songs live. Like their songs sound great when you hear it on Spotify, right? Like, it's not really about that. It's about something so much bigger. And I think that if you can think about that, like they both kind of reinvented what a concert looks like. They both reinvented the reason that people go to these things. And by the way, they did it supporting each other because they're both women who support other women. So rock on for that.
Great. We
Uh,
support that.
yes, exactly. So I think that's such a cool example though of thinking about what is different. How can we totally rethink this? And it's not, yes, they're selling concert tickets, and so is the guy who, is at your local pub who's selling them for $5. But the whole idea of innovation around experience can be
Mhm.
really powerful, especially when you tie it back to your mission.
Definitely. Completely agree. We got another question that popped in here. What are some of the most common misconceptions participants have about customer journey mapping, and how do you address them?
Oh, there are so many. So the first one is that it's about us, not them. The first one is that, we come in and they say, well, I'm here because I'm in sales and I talk to the customers and I know everything about sales. And it's like, that's great. We need that perspective. But what we really need is what's happening with the customer during that time. And so getting people out of their own headspace around what expertise they're bringing is one. The other misconception is that it has to be everything to everyone all at once. That's when it gets really overwhelming. That's why I always say we start with one persona, we start with one goal and one scope. You have to start there. If you have more than, if you want to do all the personas, if you want to do everything that the customer goes through, I cannot even describe how complicated this gets, especially in B2B, because you might have a buyer's journey. You might have a buyer for your contracts that's very different than the end user, right? So we have to really think about who is it that we're talking about and narrow in on that. So that's another one, because what you'll find is you'll be talking about, let's use that example. Let's say we want to understand the buyer more and we want to make that journey easier. So that's our scope, that's our goal, and that's our persona. And as you're talking through that, you're going to hear people say, "Yeah, but then our customers say this or our customers want this." And what we need to do as the leaders is say, okay, how does the buyer hear that information? How do they understand that? Do they bring that up? All of those things. Now, one thing that I found is that you don't want to throw those ideas away. You don't want to throw those observations away. So in every journey mapping session we have a place to record what we call ideas, opportunities, and challenges. The challenges sometimes are more urgent. They're things that maybe we identify in the moment and we're like, oh, yeah, that would affect this over here, but that's not part of our scope right now. You still want to capture that and see if it's something you need to address. Same thing with ideas and opportunities. Ideas and opportunities are, opportunities might be things that you identify in the moment and you go, oh my gosh, we are duplicating our communications. Let's fix that. So that's an opportunity. But ideas are things like, what if we could send communications on people's watches? Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah, that would be cool. Let's write that down as an idea. It's not something we're going to address in the moment. It's not something we're going to do a deep dive in that time. So you really have to stay focused. And that's the part that sometimes is hard. It's like we have to have big thinking with certain limitations so that we don't go just completely off the rails. We're focused on action. What are we trying to do? So stay focused on your goal, your scope, your persona. If somebody says, well, yeah, we've got to do all the personas, cool, do them one at a time. Start with one and then build on top of those. We don't want to boil the ocean because nothing happens. What we want to do is make sure that we can identify what is the goal we're trying to do? How can we get closer to that? What are the actions we can take around that? So that's the other thing. And then one big, big misconception is that it is basically an art project. Um, I've seen a lot of journey maps that look like kind of cartoony. and they look like graphic facilitators are there, which I love graphic facilitators. They do a great job. But if the map ends up being just something like Joe customer does all this stuff and it looks really cute and cool, but it doesn't have any action behind it, then it's not really doing anything. And so, yes, the map should be a visual representation of something, of part of the journey and all of that. But at the end of the day, you could do that with stick figures and with post-it notes and still come out with a list of actions. So stay focused on the goal of what it is. It's not about the map, it's about the mapping. That's why we call it a verb, not a noun. Excuse me.
Totally agree. We got a question from Farhana. And hi, I think we have a call this afternoon. So great to
Oh,
see you
good.
here. What challenges do an organization encounter when implementing customer journey mapping across the value chain?
Whew. Okay. So again, this comes down to your goal. When we talk about the value chain, which by the way, you just set me up to talk about our newest LinkedIn Learning course, which is about the CX value chain. The value chain is all about really understanding what are the efforts that you're putting into customer experience, delivering for your organization. What is the value there? So when we think about journey mapping, that is really about the customer journey. Then we have tools like service blueprinting that help us dig into what that actually means for process, tools, technology, people. So they're kind of two steps in the process, but the journey mapping is really about what is the customer experiencing and where is it going wrong? Where are there barriers, challenges, et cetera? Maybe opportunities just to be better. Then we have to dig into that and figure out what does that actually mean? And so sometimes what that means is understanding things like, you know what, the supply chain management is not going well. And that's impacting the delivery of the value for not only our customers, but our organization. So you really have to look at the goal, the scope, and then what is the actual customer journey or what is the ideal journey that we want to deliver? And then how does that tie in to the organization itself, both internally with process people, technology tools, as well as how will this provide value for the organization? So there are so many challenges. I don't even know where to start. It really is about defining what success looks like so that you know if you're getting there. That's the step I see skipped the most often. We say things like, well, journey mapping is a goal for us this year. No, journey mapping is a tool. What is the goal that we want to do? How will that provide value? Where does that fit into the overall organization? How do we make sure that we are using the business case to prove the return on the investment? So that's I think the biggest challenge is when we treat this like it's a standalone thing that is just for the sake of doing it. We have to make sure that it's always tied in to the value of what these efforts are bringing to the organization. Hope that scratched the surface. There's a lot there.
Another one we've got here. How can teams define and measure success during a customer journey mapping session? Woo, you better take another drink because I know that that's a long
I
one.
know. I'm going to have to hear that one again. What is it? Sorry.
How can teams define and measure success during a customer
Mhm.
journey mapping session?
Mhm. There are a couple low tech and high tech ways to do this. So, the low tech, if you come out of journey mapping with a list of 100 places where you can improve the journey, you also have to tie each of those to what will that do for your organizational goals. That's a great way to prove it. If you come out with 100 and you know you don't have the bandwidth to do them all, by identifying where you'll have the most impact on your organizational goals, that helps you prioritize those things. We use a very simple matrix called a prioritization matrix, where basically you're deciding, does this have a high impact or low impact, and is it highly feasible or not so feasible? That will help you understand kind of where to invest. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, so when you come out of journey mapping, you will have things to do. you need to tie that back to what will that do for the organization. So that's number one. Number two is the act of journey mapping is such a great way to engage a cross functional team to really understand the customer experience and collaborate with one another. I just this week, we were with a client, and one of the things that we heard was we weren't doing journey mapping, we were doing customer experience training, but just the act of getting people together, you start seeing, oh my gosh, I know why this is happening now because that department is doing something that they think is the right thing, that maybe is the right thing, but we don't have a bridge for the customer and it's creating process woes for the customer. So just the act of getting people together and thinking from the customer's perspective has value. Now that's a little less tangible, that's a little harder to kind of identify in the moment, but that's where you have the ideas and opportunities. That's where you can start tracking things and you start saying, wow, if we did this, this is the value that we would get. Go back to your success statement. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we have it in the playlist. We have it at Experience Investigators. Defining your overall strategy based on organizational goals, leadership goals, and how you will measure success, that can still guide you with your journey mapping goals, with the scope, with everything. Start with your mission, tie it to your success strategy. And then once you get into journey mapping, you will have a clear idea of exactly how you're going to deliver that value and show that value to your organization as well. The other last thing I'll say here is journey mapping is a skill. It's something that you can use for very small things and very large things. We like something called micro mapping that we've developed where instead of saying things like, you know what, the customer calls the customer service line. Think about what that really means. If you micro map that and you think about, okay, they call this number, they get put on hold, they get transferred, when you really think about it, you can start identifying places where you could make an impact. You could say, you know what, if we could reduce this to one touch instead of four for the customer, you know, amen to that, right? Think about this a little scientifically. This is not a customer experience example, but I love this example. So, my university, I'm very proud to be a graduate of the University of Missouri, and they have lots of different, they've got the veterinarian school, they have the medical school there, they have a law school, all of it. And a couple of years ago, they realized that they could do more cross pollination with these groups. And so they identified that, the surgeries that they were doing in the medical school could benefit from the engineering students and 3D printing. So they were able to identify a use case where a little girl was coming in for spinal surgery. It usually took, and I'm not perfect on these numbers, but it usually took somewhere between 12 and 14 surgeries to correct this issue. Little 3-year-old girl, that's a lot of surgery. Nobody wants to do that. So what they started realizing was, what if they could do a scan of her spine, 3D print it, and do some practice on it? Would that help eliminate some of the surgeries? It did. They got it down to 3 surgeries for this little girl. The same thing happens with customer experience. We have to think about scientifically, how can we improve things? And so by introducing those ideas of, could we have fewer calls to service? Could we actually improve, get rid of some of the steps of purchase? Could we make it a little easier, a little more convenient? I mean, some of the things that I see in B2B, it's ridiculous. We ask people to fill out the same form 5 different times. We act like we don't know them, even though they're part of this, they're well within the sales process. Things like that can make a huge difference on not only your customer's experience, but also the operational efficiency of your organization. So don't lose sight of that as well. And I just love that story about the little girl. So I'm I'm glad I had an excuse to share it.
That's so cool. I didn't even know
Mhm.
that, and that how smart of them to do the 3D printing.
Right?
That
Right?
poor
They
little
had
girl.
it on display in one of the engineering classrooms, and they were able to print it again and again and again, and so the surgeons and the people involved could really understand what was there because everybody's different, right? And our nerves
Yeah.
are different, and by having that scan, they were able to really make sure that they knew exactly what they were getting into. And just think about the potential of that. It's so cool.
Oh, yeah, I've been rewatching Grey's Anatomy, so I was like, "Ah, how cool." Because of course, I'm a surgeon in my head now, so I'm like,
Right.
"Mm." Well, I think that that's all the questions we have, but I did want to also note that journey mapping isn't something that, like you said, it's a skill. It's something that
Mhm.
can you can get into the weeds on, and you can get like have such good intentions, but it's not really coming across the finish line like I like it to. We are here to support you. Please
Mhm.
use our learning center. Jeannie has all these great LinkedIn learning courses. We will even come in virtually or in person
Mhm.
to help you get across that finish line, or even teach you how to journey map so that you can take it throughout your organization. Like,
That's right.
we our mission is to support you guys and create fewer ruined days for customers. So let us help you. If you have any questions at all, I'll throw my email in the chat and you guys can book a call with me. We can talk. Like, we're here to help you.
Absolutely. Yep. And journey mapping is one of those things that sometimes it's the way that people need to start because
Mhm.
it's tangible and we can get it across to our customers. But again, the act of mapping, man, we've seen some really cool things happen because of it. So
Definitely.
don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of it. And by the way, I never talked about the high tech, but the high tech putting connecting your data to your journey map is so powerful as well. So if you have those tools available, there are ways that you might be able to jump in and connect the dots that way too. So,
Definitely.
all right. Well, thank you. What a good discussion today. Thank you, everybody. And
Yeah.
speaking of LinkedIn Learning, we have our latest course, the CX Value Chain, is out. It's about linking customer experience to business outcomes. I'm really proud to say that the early reviews are very good. So I hope you will go check this out. And you're going to get a little preview to watch LinkedIn Learning next week because my next course comes out, and that's all about operationalizing CX. So watch for that. So, we also have this guidebook for you, this workbook, customer journey mapping. We want you to do well on this. And so we do have tons of resources. Go ahead and check that out. One thing we've heard though, and I'm just being realistic here, is that people look at this, they watch all my videos, all that, and then they say, "Oh my gosh, I tried and it was so hard." So don't get overwhelmed. Just let us support you. Let us help you through that because it can be really overwhelming. Ground School, which is now open all the time. Our enrollment is open all the time. This is a way to really get different resources with me and the Experienced Investigators team. We help guide you through things like creating your mission statement and your success statement, whole modules on journey mapping and different things like that. We're going to have a Disruptor Day workshop coming up. So check that out. We would love to have you there. We have a great community there. And then if you have any questions and we're not on this together, or even if we are, the podcast Experience Action is all about answering your questions. So leave me a voicemail at askgenie.vip and I will answer your question on the podcast. We have a whole playlist on YouTube with these episodes. And once a month, we have a really fun episode called CX Pulse Check, where we talk about CX in the news, as well as invite a special co host. So those are super fun as well. Please subscribe wherever you listen, and you can also check that out on YouTube as well. As Paige mentioned, we are here for you. We have all these different resources. Let us know what you want to hear about on our next session. Our next session will be in October, I believe on the 25th. So we will set that up and make sure that you sign up for that. We love hearing from you. We love this community. We love what you do. And we think you're great. So keep fighting the good fight on behalf of your customers. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.